were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. So 4 people. Every time that we see the number 4, well, it connects with the 4 letters of the name Yahweh. It represents the 4 levels of creation, which are emanation, creation, formation, and so 4 levels of creation, 4 letters of the name, 4 corners of the earth, and the number 4 also is the value of the letter Dalet, which is the door, the gate, which Yahushua said, I am the gate. That's why we all who are spread across the 4 corners of the earth, we all have to accept Mashiach, because he is the only door through whom we must go in order to serve the King Yahweh. So 4 is pretty much all the people that will enter, what it represents, of course. The 1, Daniel, represents the chosen few who are one body, one temple, one doctrine. And the 3 friends represent the many from the nations who believe in his death and resurrection, and therefore will be justified through their belief after they die. So the number 3 represents the many, for many reasons that we will also see as we study more and more. So those 4 represent the few and the many. Daniel, the few, and Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, the many.